Hello and welcome to the pre-performance talk for Opera Grand Rapids' production of Mozart's Cosi fan tutte. My name is John Jones, past president of the Friends of the Opera and treasurer of the Opera Grand Rapids board. As a lifelong opera lover, this is my third year presenting these talks. These talks and the projected English super titles of Opera Grand Rapids productions have been sponsored by the Friends of the Opera since well before I was born. Friends of the Opera, or FOTO, works to support opera awareness and education and seeks to make opera more accessible to people of all ages. Please consider supporting our many efforts through a membership at photogr.org. I always start these talks asking by a show of hands how many of you are seeing an opera for the first time. Even though I'm not physically in front of you, as I normally would be in the performance hall, I'm still going to ask the question. If this is your first time seeing an opera, please raise your hand. Go ahead, don't be shy. I always like to see how many new people, or at least now, allow those who are lifelong opera lovers and those regular attendees to see how many newcomers it is. And in fact, you may have actually been brought by one of those regular opera goers as this being your first time. Opera is the culmination and convergence of so many art forms and artisans, and giving it the name, the Queen of the Arts. It takes an orchestra, singers, production crew members, set builders, costume designers, volunteers, and now even health professionals many months before tonight's production in order to ensure a success. One of the things that I always like to note about opera over other art forms is its lack of amplification. The singers project based upon their body's own natural ability. The simulcast being done as part of our production is an exception to this. Thanks be to microphones and cameras for making it possible in an era of COVID-19 to put on this production with social distancing and capacity reductions of the theater. With that, let's get on to the core of the talk. We'll cover details about Cosi fan tutte's performance history, the cultural significance, the characters, an overview of the plot, and have a special behind-the-scenes look of this production with Opera Grand Rapids assistant conductor and director of music education, Austin McWilliams. Cosi fan tutte, if you want an Italian mouthful, the full title, Cosi fan tutte, ossia la scuola degli amanti, translates to All Women Do It, or The School for Lovers. It's a comedic opera in 2 acts by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart that debuted in 1790. The Italian libretto was written by Austrian court librettist Lorenzo da Ponte, who also wrote the librettos for The Marriage of Figaro and Don Giovanni. Although Mozart ultimately composed Cosi fan tutte, it was Salieri who outranked him as Kapellmeister and had previously begun the work of composing the opera. He had only worked on 2 trios before discontinuing. Suggestions have been made that it was due to the less than stellar and not well-developed plot of Da Ponte's libretto, but the exact reason is unknown for certain. The premise of the plot is simple. 2 friends, Guglielmo and Ferrando, brag that their fiancées, Fiordaligi and Dorabella, who happen to be sisters, are incapable of infidelity. An older, more philosophical man, Don Alfonso, bets that he can prove them wrong in 24 hours or less, and enlists the help of the sister's devious maid, Despina, to help him in this practical joke. He coerces the young men to disguise themselves as strangers in an attempt to seduce the women, which they do successfully. Although Don Alfonso won the bet, he advises his friends to forgive their fiancés and to learn from the experience. Many complain today about how movie producers don't work well with new ideas. They don't try to, find something new to create a movie about. They're always going on to reimagine and remake the same stories and over again. A Star is Born, for example, in its 4th rendition in Aladdin by Disney, having been done a couple of times now. Another example is the plot of Dances with Wolves, Fern Gully, Pocahontas, and Avatar. All have a man who joins up with his natives and ends up loving the culture of those they are trying to exploit. He also ends up falling in love with one of their women. All of this leads to the natives and the hero joining forces against those that he came to the new land with to take advantage of the resources. This idea of repeating the same plot is nothing new. The plot of Cosi fan tutte, for example, had already been used by many authors over history, including Boccaccio, Shakespeare, and Cervantes, just to name a few. But back to Mozart. As a result of Salieri discontinuing work, Mozart took over the task, given his role as court composer. Mozart's first biographer, Franz Nemeczek, wrote about Mozart and Cosi fan tutte. People are universally amazed that this great genius could condescend to waste his heavenly and sweet melodies on such a miserable and clumsy text. I don't think he had any opinions at all. It was not in his power to refuse the commission, and the text was given to him expressly. Mozart's life was quite a roller coaster of luxury and abject poverty, and this period was one of the latter. The composer's wife, Constance, had required expensive treatments the summer earlier when she was pregnant with their fifth child, a daughter who died within an hour of her birth. In addition to his personal troubles, the court emperor, Joseph II, had been waging war on the Ottoman Empire in collaboration with Russia. The war devastated Vienna's economy, and as a freelance artist, Mozart was especially vulnerable to the fallout. The emperor even contemplated shutting down the court theater to save money, but was talked out of this extreme and drastic measure. Opera was originally set in Naples. With Naples' natural beauty and abundant sunshine, the city was a popular destination in the 18th century, and the vast number of woodwinds found in the score evokes the breezy atmosphere of a warm Mediterranean coast. As part of the plot of deception, the two leading men, Guglielmo and Ferrando, are supposedly called off to war, an idea that may seem contrived now, but at the time would have resonated with the audiences given the war with the Ottoman Empire and many being called off to war. The first performance took place at the Burg Theater in Vienna on January 26, 1790, just 2 years before Mozart's death. It was performed only 5 times before the Emperor Joseph II died. This closed all the theaters as a standard protocol of court mourning. This unfortunate occurrence gave it a slow start, and only a handful of performances followed when Cosi's run resumed later that summer. It is said that Mozart extremely disliked the soprano who was cast or imagined for the original role of Fiordaligi, that being Adriana Ferraresi de Bene, De Ponte's arrogant mistress. As such, Mozart filled her showpiece aria Come Scoglio with constant leaps from low to high and high to low, knowing that she had the tendency to raise her head on high notes and lower it when low notes came around, hoping that she would look like a chicken bobbing around on the stage. If ever we needed an example of Mozart's commonly known immaturity and love for a jest, this certainly is one of that. As Cosi fan tutte was slow to make it around the globe, it wasn't until 1811 that it was performed in London, and then even much later did it make it to the United States at the Metropolitan Opera in 1922. While the plot did not offend Viennese audiences of the day, that shifted in the 19th and 20th centuries when the opera was considered risque, vulgar, and even immoral with its plot. The opera was rarely performed, and when it was, several elements were cut out or changed to appease the audiences of the time. After World War II, however, it became part of the standard opera repertoire once again, and is still frequently performed today. Now let's get a little behind-the-scenes look of our production with Austin McWilliams. 3, 2, 1. I'm joined now by Austin McWilliams, the assistant conductor and director of music education for Opera Grand Rapids. Austin, thank you so very much for joining me today for this addition to the pre-performance talk.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.
And you've been with Opera Grand Rapids. Now, this is your second month officially?
Third month, I guess, depending on how you slice it. Yeah, I've been with the company since August.
Time flies when you're having fun. Well, thank you so much for bringing us a behind the scenes look at our production of Cosi. And let's jump right in. COVID-19, this is not being done live in front of an audience for the pre-performance talk. We're pre-recording this, given the logistics and multiple venues and the simulcast and all of that. So how is it that Opera Grand Rapids is working to put on an opera performance in light of COVID-19, social distancing? How have we had to adjust our setting of it?
Well, first of all, we're lucky to have administrative staff and artists who are willing to do this. There's an inherent level of risk involved in singing at any time, but especially right now during the pandemic. But we have taken every step that one could possibly take during this pandemic to mitigate the risk that our artists are facing right now. So it all started with our partnership with Metro Health. We're really lucky to have them as a partner to test all of the artists for COVID when they arrived to Grand Rapids. And so this applies to the singers, this applies to everyone working backstage, this applies to the orchestra as well. I think the most prominent way that the audience is going to notice the COVID-19 restrictions is the actual blocking and the set that you're going to see on the stage tonight. Every artist has a box, a rectangular box on stage that they almost never leave throughout the duration of the show. And the boxes are such that all the artists will always be singing 15 feet apart from one another at any given time, per the AGMA guidelines. And there, throughout the rehearsal process, have been extended breaks between our rehearsals in order to allow the room to, the air in the room to clear here in the Betty Van Endel Opera Center, so that any aerosols sticking around in the room might be killed immediately by the ionizer that we've had installed in our HVAC. We've also been singing partially with masks when the singers are marking, and every once in a while without masks, such as in music rehearsals. So we're just trying to mitigate the risks in as many ways as possible while still creating a product that is artistically fulfilling in the end.
Certainly. One of the other things, as we're talking about music history in and around this opera in particular, FACH, the FACH, the standard voice types that we now know as tenor and baritone and soprano and all of that, really, they weren't developed yet when Mozart was writing this opera. There was more so a general, here's what the person should be able to accomplish based upon the range. And accordingly, the casting changes. So sometimes, a mezzo-soprano is replaced for the two soprano leading roles, which we've actually done for this production. So talk about our particular casting a little bit.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you bring up. This whole concept of differentiating between a soprano and a mezzo-soprano is relatively new in the grand scale of human singing and isn't really something that a composer like Mozart would have taken into account at the time. So depending on the opera source that you consult, the three female roles in this opera, Fiordiligi, Dorabella, and Despina, might all be considered sopranos. But when you look at the actual range and the tessitura of those three parts, you can tell that they're definitely not equal. Fiordiligi definitely sits above Dorabella and Despina. So in many modern productions, we have voice types who might be considered mezzos singing Dorabella and Despina, as we do here in this production. Fiordiligi, however, no matter what era, will always be a soprano. Yeah. That role goes sky high. You could say a similar thing about the two male roles, Don Alfonso and Guglielmo. It's interesting because oftentimes today, Don Alfonso is cast as a bass. Now we do have baritone Stephen Conti in this role. But you can actually tell from the way that Mozart has written the score, Guglielmo is the bottom part. He intended for Guglielmo to be the lower role, when really the roles are approximately equal in terms of range and tessitura. You really just have to pick the roles today based on, I think, characters and the abilities of the voice more than some sort of arbitrary categorization.
Certainly. Well, thank you so much for taking the few moments that you did, and toi, toi, toi.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
230 years after its debut, Cosi fan tutte doesn't get any better, at least the plot that is, than it was in 1790, but the beauty and complexities of Mozart's arias continue to be praised by music historians and opera lovers as some of Mozart's best. With that, I hope you enjoy Opera Grand Rapids' production of Cosi fan tutte.